Hey there, I'm Gotti Schwartz, and we are coming on the air tonight with breaking news. A bunch of new pieces of potential evidence were just published by the Manhattan DA's office, and they give us more information into the moments before and after Luigi Mangione's arrest. Now, all this coming exactly 1 year since prosecutors say he gunned down UnitedHealthcare CEO Brian Thompson in Manhattan. We're talking never before seen photos like these. A large amount of cash, over $7,000 from the looks of it. There's this fake ID. That was also in a wallet. There was the name Mark Rosario on that fake ID. There was a laptop, flashlight, some change, all of which Mangione had on him, police say, when he was arrested at a McDonald's in Pennsylvania. We're also hearing the 911 call that led to his arrest for the very first time. Listen to this.
Blair 911, what is the address of your emergency?
It's not really an emergency. I'm a manager at Plank Road McDonald's out here on the Boulevard.
Okay.
And I have a customer here that some other customers were suspicious of, that he looks like the CEO shooter from New York.
Okay.
So they're just really upset, and they're like coming to me, and I was like, well, I can't approach him.
Now, of course, this all comes before the high-stakes pre-trial hearing of Mangione's murder case. It's going to happen down the road. Remember, Mangione's lawyers want a judge to throw out key evidence against him, including the alleged murder weapon and writings from a journal that was also seized inside that backpack. Mangione has pleaded not guilty to both state and federal charges, but this hearing and now these images have given everyone a very, very big preview of the evidence in what could be a very big trial to watch. We've got the dynamic duo who has been following this closely, NBC News correspondent Ellison Barber and NBC News legal analyst Misty Marris. First off, Ellison, can you walk us through everything that we're seeing here today?
Yeah, I mean, you look at some of the exhibits, the photos that were released by the Manhattan DA this evening, and a lot of it are items that maybe we hadn't seen before. This picture right here in particular really stood out to me. It is wads of cash. Police say Mangione had over $7,000 on his persons at the time he was arrested, as well as foreign currency. They're showing the different things that they obtained from him when they encountered him in this McDonald's in Altoona, Pennsylvania. A lot of it not necessarily, for at least visually to us, right, not earth-shattering. I was sort of hoping, looking through it, that there would be some of the body camera footage that we've seen prosecutors and the defense go through with officers on the stand the last 3 days of this hearing. That was not in there, but there was that 911 call, and that was something that we hadn't heard before. And you heard in her voice there when the McDonald's manager called police initially, she was basically apologizing for calling 911, saying, I tried to call your non-emergency line but couldn't get through, but a lot of customers are concerned. We heard in some of the testimony throughout this hearing from the responding officers that when they got the call, they didn't think this was really going to be a real tip. They were even joking with their supervisors, one of them saying, if this is the guy, I'll buy you a hoagie. And then they say when they got there and he removed his mask, both of them say because they'd been closely following media coverage that they had seen images, and they say in their mind there was no doubt that this was the person police in New York were looking for. And then they started talking to him in that McDonald's and ultimately made that arrest. Gotti?
Yeah, you can almost hear incredulity in that 911 call. Misty, why are we getting these images, these pieces of evidence, basically in the middle of a suppression hearing?
So everything Ellison laid out, all of this that we're seeing for the first time, so much has been behind closed doors in this case in order to keep a neutral jury pool to the extent possible. And even in this hearing, the defense had made the argument at the beginning saying that the judge should not release evidence that's being used during this hearing, because if it ultimately didn't make it into the trial, people could see it, and those people could potentially find their way onto the jury, and it could be prejudicial. Of course, there's challenges to that due to transparency, and now we're seeing it coming out in dribs and drabs.
And Ellison, talking about today's hearing, because it wasn't just what we're seeing here, can you break down some of the moments that really struck out to you?
Yeah, I mean, ultimately, big picture, this hearing is about evidence and what police in Altoona, Pennsylvania did and did not do when they encountered Luigi Mangione in that McDonald's. Two major constitutional issues are at play. One is related to the roughly 17 minutes when police officers were speaking with Luigi Mangione prior to reading him his Miranda rights. The other is related to evidence they obtained on his person and also in a bag that he had with him without having a search warrant. Remember, some of the evidence that was allegedly recovered out of that bag included the alleged murder weapon, as well as a notebook with writings that could go to motive and intent. So the evidence that's inside of that bag, incredibly important for the state's case. The defense says it was obtained illegally. The judge should toss all of it out. On the stand today, we heard from Officer Tyler Fry. He and his police partner were the one who responded to that 911 call and ultimately were the officers who arrested Luigi Mangione. So here are a couple of exchanges that really stood out to me and seemed significant as they were going through Officer Fry's body camera footage. In one of them, one of the assistant DAs said, "Do you see where the bag is, where the defendant is seated? What is the distance?" Officer Fry answers, "About a foot." In another, you have the defense, an attorney for the defense, Jacob Kaplan, on cross, asking Officer Fry if he or the other officers that were there, if they moved the bag, and they said, "Nothing prevented you from moving the bag." He says, "Correct." They say, "Mangione did not do anything to prevent you from moving or touching his bag." He says, "Correct." He says Mangione wasn't being aggressive. He's just wiping his mouth. Officer Fry says, "Yes." He asks him, he said, "Nothing he had done in those 13 minutes was anything for you to be concerned about." Officer Fry says, "No." The defense attorney asks, he says, "He did not say, 'Don't move my backpack' or 'Don't touch my backpack'." Fry says, "Correct." In another exchange, you had the assistant district attorney talking to Officer Fry again, asking him, "Did you say you were under arrest?" Officer Fry says no. He says, "Did you mention the New York City shooting?" Officer Fry says no. He says, "Did you take your pistol out?" Officer Fry says no. He says, "Did you tell him he was not free to leave?" Officer Fry says no. The defense in that cross-exam also talked a lot about the amount of police that were there. All of it seemed like significant nuggets to the different points that they're looking at in this hearing case. Gotti.
Interesting. Misty, I've been watching your analysis of this all day, and am I understanding this correctly? You know, the defense is really trying to get all of this tossed out, but does it seem like that's going to happen before trial?
It's very challenging, Gotti. It's an uphill battle for a defendant, and this hinges on two constitutional issues: whether or not a warrantless search was justified under the circumstances. Warrantless searches in general, they are unconstitutional, but there are exceptions. Ellison laid out so much of the critical testimony today relating to whether or not there's something called exigent circumstances, an emergency situation that would warrant the search at the site. The other being whether or not he was questioned. That depends on whether it was an investigative detention versus a custodial interrogation, whether or not he was under arrest during that time. Critical issues here, Gotti, that are going to have a huge impact on this trial.
Yeah, either way, the public is seeing a lot of this laid in front of them well before the trial. Ellison Barber and Misty Marris, I really appreciate your time. Thank you so much.